You've mentioned that there's sometimes obstacles or many distributors that haven't really taken the initiative to look at all of these options. I mean, why haven't a lot of distributors moved forward with this kind of planning for their business?
That's a great question, and I think many times it has to do with our own sense of mortality. People keep putting off these decisions because they think that, well, I'll wait another year or two until things seem clear to me as the owner. I haven't really decided what I want to do. Waiting for business to get better, waiting to solve internal problems at the company, perhaps. And I know the topic today, Lindsay, is not about having an advisory board or a board of directors, but I will argue that family-owned or privately held distributors that have an advisory board or a board of directors are often way ahead in terms of planning, because if the outside advisors are doing their job, they're going to insist that the ownership make plans, at least to write a letter of wishes to the board that says, in the event of my untimely death, this is what I want you to do. Somebody typically from the outside has to push the owners to do the things that they innately that they know they need to do, but if they're level 4 leaders, they may be running a great business, but if they're not at level 5, they're not willing to put down what they're working on and focus instead on the future of their business. As people say, instead of working in it, they need to work on it. They may be waiting for the family lawyer and accountant to come along and say, well, it's time to plan the future of the business. But in my experience, they don't do that. The only outsider who actually typically acts as a catalyst for long-term family business planning and succession is the life insurance industry, because those agents are paid to sell life insurance policies, and they're sometimes persistent enough to get the owners to do things, or at least to think about things that they otherwise put to the back of their minds. And it's so helpful when there's a plan, because oftentimes death comes at an unlikely moment. And if there are no plans, it's a chaotic situation. It pits family members against one another, creates tremendous uncertainty on the part of the non-family employees. Most of those problems, that chaos, can be avoided with an orderly succession plan and an estate plan for those who own the business.
Let's back up a little bit to the comments on the advisory board. Do you have any tips on how a distributor can effectively put one together that would have the impact that it should have on the business?
I do. It's one of my favorite topics in a way, because I'm on several advisory boards for wholesale distributors, and I've seen them at work through thick and thin. And my advice in a nutshell would be to get 3 independent people to be on the advisory board. And whether it's an advisory board or a board of directors, it doesn't matter. I'm not a lawyer, so there are differences legally, but there aren't many functional differences. 3 independent people would not be the company's lawyer and accountant. They may be on the board, but in addition to 3 really independent people, I think companies who are looking to put a board together can aim pretty high. You can get experienced people who've been business owners themselves, or who've been executives at larger companies. They really enjoy the interaction at a board, and they're very flattered to be included. If they have the right set of skills and some good connections, which of course is always nice to have, because they can lead to more business opportunities, I would say 4 half-day meetings each year is enough. The board should be focusing on the company's leadership, and they should be focusing on the company's strategy, not just financial topics. Sometimes boards get just overwhelmed with looking at financial reports, but you need a monthly update or some kind of a report from the CEO, and you need to be in touch between meetings. But the real focus of the board should be, of course, to ensure that the company is properly financially managed, but to make sure that the company has a good strategy and that it's executing the strategy and that the leadership is leading. And I think that for the very small cost involved, the value of having a board is enormous, and it's very surprising to me that so many companies don't take advantage of it.
Thanks, Brent. To wrap up, could you kind of summarize some best practices that distributors can use when they are embarking on this process to plan the next steps for their company?
Since we were talking about advisory boards just now, I'll mention it again. I think setting up an advisory board is really important. Don't turn the business over to the wrong person. Too many companies, family companies especially, get trapped, but even non-family companies, into turning the business over to somebody who's sort of waiting in the wings but is really not the right person. And if you're not sure if it's the right person or not, it's wonderful to be able to ask your advisory board, because there you'll get honest answers. The people in your own company sometimes can't give you honest answers. I would avoid non-working owners. I don't like the idea where a family business has family members who own significant amounts of stock in the business but don't work there, because they end up in some sort of a dispute inevitably with the people who own it and work there, because there's a dispute that they're taking too much salary, they're taking too many risks, they keep plowing money back in the business, they want distributions in the form of dividends and what have you. Maybe a token amount of symbolic ownership is fine for family legacy type reasons, but I believe the non-working owners should satisfy their income needs with a portfolio that's outside the business. They have less risk, more diversity, etc. I would like to avoid minority owners if possible. I mentioned earlier about using phantom stock rather than giving small slices of stock to people in the company. Minority ownership in a very small business or even a medium-sized business is not a good idea. It's not liquid. You can't put a value on it. You can't get any cash flow from it unless the majority owner feels like distributing dividends, which most don't in the distribution world. So I would say minority ownership should be avoided. And as last three things, this is just pure business advice for any company, but distributors, of course, it applies. Build a business that somebody else would want to own. If you have a business with inventories out of whack and you've got a lot of bad receivables and you've got a bunch of employees around who shouldn't really be there, your facilities are not in good shape, you maybe have environmental problems, the housekeeping is bad, the IT system is not adequate, the financial department does not produce timely, accurate information, who would want to run a business like that? It's miserable, and ask yourself then who would want to buy it if it's not fixed up, as it would be if you were selling your house. Put rock-solid plans in place just in case somebody dies when they're not supposed to, because that's what happens. And rock-solid plans will help you keep that continuity in ownership and management. And last but not least, keep your powder dry. Cash is king, and I don't like it when companies strip out their cash availability from their bank lines and so on, because that way they don't have the flexibility they need. If there's an unexpected problem, including an untimely death, they don't have the cash needed to get through that situation. So those are my recommendations, Lindsay.
Great. Well, thank you, Brent, for providing some insight today on what distributors should keep in mind when considering the next step in a distribution company's life. Where can distributors go to get more information?
I did mention life insurance agents before. I'm not suggesting that everybody should go out and buy life insurance. A great lawyer and a great accountant who really understand what needs to be done in terms of the legal and tax issues, that's so important. But as a catalyst to get things going, it's wonderful to have a board. If you don't have one, Evergreen Consulting is happy to help you set one up. And, of course, we do give companies advice, but there are a lot of great consultants out there who can help distributors with these problems.
Great. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today, Brent.
Always a pleasure to talk to Modern Distribution Management, MDM. Thanks, Lindsay.